Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on India's national broadcaster Doordarshan about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations and important countries with whom India is developing close friendships. Viewers, in this episode, we are taking a close look at the comprehensive strategic partnership between India and Malaysia. Malaysia and India are maritime neighbors. We share the common home in the Indo-Pacific, and the two countries are now committed to advancing their strategic partnership to higher levels. So what is driving the momentum in Malaysia-India relations? Why is this important for the region and for the world? These are some of the themes we will be taking up in this episode. And to discuss this, I am very privileged to introduce you to a Malaysian scholar, Dr. Chee Meng Tan. Dr. Tan is at the University of Nottingham Malaysia in Selangor state, and he is a political economist and focuses on foreign policy in the region. Dr. Tan, welcome to Indian Diplomacy.
Thank you very much.
You have seen a very successful visit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Malaysia, and lots of new developments are taking place. They are also consolidating the strategic partnership that was elevated to comprehensive level in 2024. Let me start by asking you, from the Malaysian perspective, from your foreign policy perspective, why is India becoming more important, and all these agreements and the deals that are being announced are manifestations of this centrality of India that seems to be increasing in the Malaysian calculus. So please tell our audiences the Malaysian perspective about India and why the salience of India is growing in the Malaysian lens.
So one of the things that ASEAN, which Malaysia is a prominent member of, looks at centrality, inclusivity, as well as neutrality. So neutrality is a very big issue right now with the geopolitical war that's actually going between the US and China. So what's happened is the Malaysians don't want to be caught in between taking sides. We don't want to be seen as either being pro-American very overtly or even Chinese. So we need to have what we call strategic diversification. And the saliency of India then becomes very important because India is a regional power, it is a growing economy, it has a thriving population that is highly educated as we speak. So having a country like India who would actually trade more in Malaysia, who would invest in Malaysia eventually even more, becomes very, very important because, again, we don't want to be caught in between the Chinese and the US too much.
Yeah, and so just taking that forward, so India comes across as boosting the autonomy and the choices for Malaysia, I presume. Just few years ago, we had actually strained relations with Malaysia during the previous administration of Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. But last few years, especially since Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has come in, we are seeing a sea change and a transformation. At that time, there were more friction about issues relating to Kashmir and the status of religious minorities in India, and the Malaysians were raising these kinds of prickly conflicts, and India did not like it. But since Anwar Ibrahim has come in, there is a complete transformation in a positive direction. So let's talk a little bit about Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, the current administration in Malaysia, their foreign policy priorities, and where the convergence is coming with India.
Well, yeah, we had a previous prime minister who was very vocal about these sort of issues, for sure. Anwar is, of course, a Muslim scholar. At the very same time, is also a very pragmatic politician as well. I think Prime Minister Anwar takes, again, a very pragmatic role when it comes to looking at value issues as well as investment, because the economy is very, very important to all Malaysians and everyone involved, obviously. India has a lot of potential for cooperation in Malaysia. There's potential for growth between both countries. And I think they have the framework right now called IMPACT, which is the agreement where we're trying to have transformation or transformative actions that's actually taking place between India and Malaysia. So in the past, if you look at FDIs, for instance, we didn't have a lot of cumulative FDI between both countries. But again, because the numbers are very small in terms of investment, we have the ability to even grow further. because maybe in the past, India and Malaysia treated each other as trading partners predominantly, and investment wasn't the biggest thing. Maybe most of the investment from each country were actually in different places, for instance. So if you look at, say, Singapore, many Indian firms actually set up firms in Singapore. So it might seem like the FDI coming from Singapore is actually very, very high into Malaysia. But the reality is a lot of these FDIs are actually from Indian companies. So that may not have actually captured a lot of the Indian FDI that's actually coming into this country. So I think the convergence issue was already there. It's begun since the comprehensive strategic partnership had taken place in 2024. Just that maybe the way that these sort of things are actually funneled through to Malaysia or India may not be as clear cut as it may actually seem.
So, a less ideological, a more pragmatic, a more liberal approach under Anwar Ibrahim definitely is helping. And Dr. Tan, in fact, there's been a lot of talk about the personal chemistry between Modi and Anwar. And they both complemented each other during Prime Minister Modi's recent visit, and they actually get along very well. And sometimes, changes in regimes can bring about a sea change in the overall relationship, and therefore it looks much more positive right now. So I think that's something we should be really cheering for. The other point you already mentioned is about the economic complementarities, and let's go there. India-Malaysia trade is around close to $20 billion, but we can do a lot more. Malaysia-China, for example, is massive, right? It's like $190 billion or something like that. So it's almost 10 times bigger. And there, I think the baseline is low, so I think we can aim for a lot more. And many new agreements have been signed, including in digital cooperation, for integrating the currencies of the two sides, for using ringgit and rupee, and also for the payment systems to be aligned for our what we call the UPI. These payment interfaces, if they are used on both sides, then it can also facilitate easier trade and commerce, tourism. We have a massive diaspora there. It's the second largest Indian diaspora in the world after the US. It's almost close to 3 million. And we saw amazing visuals of that too. And they also facilitate the economic exchanges with India, isn't it? So tell us a little more about the economic potential, and especially given that Malaysia is also part of the ASEAN bloc, and there is already an ASEAN-India free trade agreement which is being renegotiated to make it more balanced. But Malaysia, is one of the top, economic powerhouses within ASEAN. So tell us more about what we can do together in the economic realm, what you are seeing, and what we could potentially extend in this domain.
We're looking at India. You've seen that the IT potential, the computing potential has risen over the years in massive ways. So I think that India has lots of talent that Malaysia could actually employ and actually use in developing our economy. And at the same time, Malaysia has the manufacturing and certain resource capacity to actually utilize these talents as well. So I would say that when we're actually looking at what we can actually do together, semiconductors become very important, partly because of the geopolitical tensions that's occurred between the Chinese and the Americans. Lots of foreign firms are actually sort of diversifying their supply chain away from China. So obviously Apple has started massive manufacturing of their iPhones and computers and things of the sort in India, and they need massive amounts of semiconductors. So Malaysia is the 6th largest exporter of semiconductors in the world, and that becomes a very, very big potential of cooperation between both India and Malaysia. But more importantly, for the Malaysians, we have always been seen as also sort of assemblers of semiconductor chips and all that. And so Malaysia, if we were to move out of the middle income trap, as what we call it in the World Bank, into a higher income nation, then we have to look at innovation, we have to look at talent management, we have to look at different sort of things where we're not just assembling things for people, but we're actually designing and creating innovative technology. And I think with the help of India, the synergy that would actually occur between Malaysia and India would actually make this a reality. And of course, being a partner for India means that India has massive access to the ASEAN market through Malaysia, not just Singapore, but through Malaysia as well. So I would say that this is a win-win situation for both countries, where India would have increased market access through Malaysia and also be friend with a a moderate Muslim country, that would actually help maybe relationships between India and the Muslim world as well. And at the same time, it would also be beneficial for Malaysia because then we could actually utilize Indian talent to become a high-income nation.
You're right. There are a lot of cutting-edge areas in which the two sides are now extending cooperation, and that is very encouraging. And you also mentioned the important point about Malaysia being a moderate Muslim country like Indonesia. These two are very big heavyweights in the region, both Muslim majority countries, and I think it will also matter to us there. And in a way, that takes me to the next discussion pointer as well, which is about the security and defense cooperation. Dr. Tan, both sides have agreed, to firmly counter radicalism, extremism, and terrorism. And this is one, and this linked to the ideological factor which you just mentioned, which is that Malaysia is under a moderate regime now. So I think this is one area, and then there is of course the potential for India to extend deeper defense and security cooperation with Malaysia in terms of fighter aircraft and submarines, and not just potential sales but also maintenance and joint production and those sort of ideas. So tell us a little more about these two areas, especially the maritime security, especially involving submarines and patrolling aircraft and those sort of issues. What are the threats that Malaysia is facing right now in the region?
Well, if you're looking at the terrorism and the cybersecurity domain, obviously information sharing between both sides become very important because India is a very IT savvy and a country that has a great deal of computing potential. So obviously cybersecurity, AI, and things of these sorts, along with IT, become very, very important. So obviously the information sharing, the information gathering through technology would actually be very important between both countries, India and Malaysia. Of course, we're looking at the threat we actually face. Obviously, the South China Sea has been an issue, but it's not just a Malaysian issue, it's an ASEAN issue for the most part, having these sort of disputes with China. That's one major part. Another part that's actually really, really important is the Straits of Malacca. That's a very strategic place where Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia actually have joint patrols and control over. So obviously, if you're looking at fuel security, energy security, with natural gas or even petroleum being transported from the Middle East, through the Indian Ocean and through the Straits of Malacca to China and other parts of the world, that becomes a very, very huge security risk if this is actually not done well. So obviously the joint military exercises or security or drills that will take place between the Indian authorities as well as the ASEAN and even Malaysian authorities then become very important in ensuring that the very important energy security route of the Straits of Malacca is actually secure for international use. So I would say that there is definitely a lot of potential for cooperation in that regard. And of course, Malaysia uses a lot of Sukhoi or Su fighters, which are basically Russian made anyway. But India also has a lot of these things. So although the fighter plane, the specifications are slightly different, but there's definitely a lot of talks that we can actually have production, manufacturing, support, maintenance that would actually take place from the Indian side in helping the Malaysian authorities actually maintain and produce these sort of aircraft. And of course, there is the news that just came out about how India is actually trying to convince the Malaysians to buy the Dornier aircrafts for coastal guard patrols. That's also another potential area of cooperation. And I would say that perhaps, this is only my speculation, of course, that it's very likely that the Malaysian government would actually purchase a number of these aircrafts after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit. So I'm not very surprised about these sort of things. But I mean, going forward, I would say that there's definitely a lot of things that both countries could actually get involved in terms of FDI trade, and definitely in defensive technology as well as cooperation. And we have all these sort of things going on already. If there's a Samudra Lakshmana drills that were actually going on. Army drills have actually gone on as well in Malaysia in the recent past. So definitely we have these things going on, and we can actually have more going forward.
Yeah, no, these are all very promising domains. Dr. Tan, you already mentioned the fact that the disputes of the South China Sea involve not only Malaysia but other claimants also who are contesting the Chinese presence and expansion. Now here, our audiences would be interested in knowing the Malaysian approach to handling them, because the Philippines and the Vietnam have been especially the Philippines, have been far more assertive in trying to push back or to challenge the Chinese claims. And there are lots of incidents that you see where the Chinese Navy or Coast Guard are ramming ships of the Philippines and so on. But in the case of Malaysia, you've adopted a more low profile and a low key approach and have tried to sort out your differences with the Chinese diplomatically. And interestingly, India's defense cooperation with Vietnam and the Philippines is more advanced than we have with Malaysia. And even with Indonesia, we are doing more defense and security cooperation, relatively speaking, compared to Malaysia. But as you said, this visit and the defense cooperation, the maritime awareness and surveillance and all these capabilities, if India can enhance Malaysia's capabilities, that will be really good. But still, the point I'm trying to make is Malaysia has a softer approach to China, isn't it? And it tries to balance different factors compared to a Philippines or even compared to a Vietnam. So in that context, how does India come in? I mean, is it like a subtle counterbalancing force for Malaysia?
I wouldn't say Malaysia is necessarily a lot softer with China. I would say that the approach that the Malaysian government is actually taking is more subtle. It's just like the Kashmir issue, where the previous prime minister was actually more vocal about the entire episode, whereas the Anwar government has been more subtle about these sort of things. So I would say that when you're a relatively small country, a middle power, you have to be very pragmatic about the statements you actually make to not actually antagonize people unnecessarily. Now, if China's a very large power and you can't just go head to head with it, and maybe in a very fortunate way, Malaysia is a little further away from China compared to, say, Vietnam and the Philippines, so it wouldn't be unreasonable to actually realize that these two countries are more vocal because they share a closer border with the Chinese. Malaysia is a little further. So I wouldn't say we're necessarily softer, but we're pragmatic in the approach we're actually taking. Now, of course, I'm very sure that the Malaysian government and the Malaysians in general are very happy if India becomes a superpower, a huge major power in the world, where it would actually offer choices and provide autonomy to smaller countries like Malaysia, Singapore, the ASEAN nations, and so on. So India definitely fits the ability to counterbalance the US and China. Perhaps in the near future, when India actually grows into a major power, that would actually become an easier thing for people to actually deal with the geopolitical threat that's actually going on right now. We don't want to be caught in between two powers. I mean, it's easier to be caught, quote unquote, in between three or four, where you can actually counterbalance each other's influence. So India definitely plays a very, very big role in the economic growth and the investment potential in Malaysia, and perhaps in the very near future, militarily as well. So I wouldn't be surprised that we would actually have more defensive cooperation with India. But perhaps in the meantime, we have to look at how we integrate our economies, how do we integrate the trade and the FDI before we talk about defense in a greater extent.
Right. They're all interconnected. Dr. Tan, I'll just extend the argument you just made, and bring in the US also. You already mentioned the great power rivalry and the competition in that region. Now, the US, Malaysia has historically also had very strong ties with the US. So, but both Anwar Ibrahim, Narendra Modi, our leaders, when they had the summit, were referring to the fact that it's a very turbulent world with a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability, and that Malaysia and India together, we can push for greater stability and certainty. And I think they're indirectly referring to the US there, right? Because the Trump administration has done lots of flip-flops and trade wars on all our countries, and we are trying to somehow steady the ship of our relations with the US. So American approach to the region and to your country in particular, please tell our audience a little more about the Malaysian perception of how they are able to handle the more volatile and flip-flop type US as opposed to a very steady hand which we were used to in the past. And again, how does India come in to try and create greater certainty and predictability in this context of US behavior?
I think there are definitely two things that become very important here. The American economy, the reason why we listen to the Americans a lot, I mean, quote unquote, we cooperate a lot with them, not just Malaysia, but so many other countries in the world, is because the American market is really, really huge and it's a superpower, militarily so and economically so. So at the end of the day, India becomes a very important country for all to see, partly because the economy is very large. It has great market potential. So at the end of the day, it could also be a very important nation when it comes to integrating with the supply chain across the world. It's part of the supply chain, but it could be even larger as well. So if you're looking at the economic potential that India actually brings alongside with the fact that it could actually be part of a major supply chain restructure that may be an alternative to the Chinese, then this becomes really, really important for Malaysia as well. So if you're actually exporting Malaysian goods, it's not just the Chinese that you're looking at. If you're looking at the supply chain, it's not just the Chinese you're looking at. You can look towards India as well. And so if India becomes like the third major or superpower within the international order that we actually see, it becomes a probably easier choice perhaps for countries across the world to actually balance the influence between the existing superpowers. So definitely going forward, I think there's a lot we can actually talk about when it comes to Indian cooperation in Malaysia across the region as well.
Right. I mean, the whole region, the whole world is waiting for India to be a great power or a leading power, and certainly we are all working towards that goal. Dr. Tan, Indo-Pacific, both the leaders refer to Indo-Pacific, and the joint statement between the Malaysia and India at the end of the latest summit also referred to the fact that we believe in rules-based order and freedom of navigation, and that there is a convergence between the Indo-Pacific outlook of ASEAN, of which Malaysia is a leading member, and also India's own approach to the Indo-Pacific, and it has initiatives and efforts to try and bring about balance in the region. So what is the prospect for the wider Indo-Pacific? You think middle powers, rising powers, which are not yet great powers but could become great powers in the near future, how can we all come together and handle the problems that we face in the Indo-Pacific at large?
In the past, when the Americans were respecting the international order, the rule-based order that we actually had, maybe the incentive and the initiative to actually work together between India, Malaysia, even the ASEAN region was not very great. I mean, the same can be actually said about ASEAN as well. I mean, ASEAN centrality, neutrality, as well as inclusivity basically means that we respect each other's decisions and we actually want to work with each other, but we're not imposing any sort of structure necessarily in a very rigid way, the way we see it with the European Union on the ASEAN region. But given what's going on with the Trump administration, given all the tariffs, the trade war, and the threats that's actually coming from Washington, you kind of wonder, is it necessary for different powers, the smaller powers, the middle powers, to actually work together? So ASEAN definitely are coming together more closely, I would say, in order to deal with the geopolitical threat coming from the geopolitical tensions coming from both Beijing as well as Washington. So in a very similar sense, if you're looking at India, India is a potential major power. It's a regional power for sure within South Asia, but at the moment it might be seen as a middle power. So middle power countries who are part of the global south should actually work together and actually form coalitions and cooperate, looking at sort of like online payments, the integration of the economic system, increasing trade, FTAs, more bilateral trades, comprehensive strategic partnerships and all that. We need to work more closely together so that when we form a better coalition, a more cooperative coalition, that could actually counterbalance some of the imminent threats that come from these very large geopolitical warfare that's actually going on. So India could actually take a leading role actually within the global south in actually allowing the middle power countries in the global south to actually come together under Indian leadership, for instance, as an example.
Right. Last word, Dr. Tan. Our audiences would like to know how India is perceived by ordinary Malaysians. I mean, there's a lot of focus in the recent bilateral visit on people-to-people exchanges, educational institutions, mutual learning. There's more Indian trained Malaysians who are coming and studying here and then going back and building your institutions. And we could do a lot more in science and technology in terms of ideas and sharing. But we also have this big diaspora there, right? I mean, almost 7% of the total population of Malaysia is of Indian origin. So there, what can we do more to harness this living bridge, as it's called, our diaspora there, and how can we bring more Malaysians to India?
I mean, if you look at when I was a kid, when I was reading history in school, we had the Srivijaya Empire as well as the Majapahit Empire, which was actually part of the large chunk of Southeast Asia, actually Indonesia, Malaysia, and all that. There was a Sanskrit-speaking empire in the past. So if you look at the Malay language, for instance, there is definitely very heavy influence on Arabic, but there's also very heavy influence of Sanskrit as well. So if you look at that, there is some shared history and connectivity between both countries. And of course, we look forward, India has jumped leaps and bounds and essentially has become a major power when it comes to computing, when it comes to IT technology and things of the sort. And Malaysia has traditionally sent many students actually to India to study medicine, especially dentistry and things of the sort. So Indian institutions like the IIM and all these places could definitely play a much larger role in cooperating with our local institutions beyond this exchange. Maybe, for instance, I work for the University of Nottingham, and we have like a branch campus here in Malaysia, although our headquarters is actually in the UK. Similarly, given the prestige and the great deal of technological advancements that have come from the IITs, that could actually be a good potential for cooperation, where you set up branch campuses here with us and so on and so forth. So if you're talking about the connectivity, we already have that. Now the only question is, if there's more investment coming in from Malaysia to India and vice versa, and there's more trade going on, you're going to definitely see a lot more connectivity. People are going to travel a lot more between two countries when money is involved, for sure. So I would say that there's a lot of room for improvement, but we're already there. And going forward, I'm sure we'll see more cooperation between New Delhi and Kuala Lumpur.
Right, there is a lot of convergence of interests between Malaysia and India. Malaysia, I must mention for all of you, is one of the Asian tigers or tiger cubs that has higher income levels than most Asian countries, and has already set a path in terms of advanced infrastructure, technology, manufacturing and digitalization. So there's much that India can also learn in terms of public policies and economic modernization by exchanging ideas and through deeper people-to-people links with Malaysia. It's definitely a win-win situation for both sides, and that's why we are proceeding with full energy. Let me thank Dr. Chee Meng Tan for sharing valuable insights about the Malaysian perspective on India, and his vision or his wish that India becomes the third great power in the world is something I think is like music to our ears, and we would like to work towards that goal. And yes, in 5 to 10 years, maybe we can be that substitute for less predictable and more aggressive great powers. We could be maybe a more benign great power in the region that can help to anchor all the issues and the problems and stabilize and take it forward. Thank you so much for joining me. Much appreciate your time and your insights and your advocacy for India.
Thank you very much.
Viewers, Malaysia-India Comprehensive Strategic Partnership has gotten an additional boost now, and there is no looking back on this. And as we discussed with the guest today, there is so much convergence of interest that I think it's only the potential that needs to be realized. We don't have to search for potential. The potential has already been unearthed, and now it is time for us to accelerate and to press the pedal and go into the top gear, and that is what the leaderships on both sides are doing. So there are going to be so many opportunities for young people on both sides, for entrepreneurs, for business persons, and also for technology enthusiasts and for traders, not to mention the diaspora, the large Indian diaspora in Malaysia, which feel empowered and who are also enjoying this golden era of Malaysia-India relations. Let's support this blossoming friendship and take it to greater heights. So thank you for watching. I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.